Hey friends, we are back, and this week I want to dive into a topic that is near and dear to my heart, very personal, but also very relevant to us, and that is the yeses that have made the biggest difference in my life. Because, we can talk about raising your hand and saying yes all day long, but let's get specific. What are we actually talking about? When we say, go live your raise your hand, say yes life, we are going to be talking about that a little bit more this week, about how those yeses actually build up to create a lifestyle. What do they look like? What do they feel like? And what's really going on underneath the surface? Now, as I share my specifics, these really are examples to show you what's possible. They might spark something in you. There might be something about them that you're drawn to, but I want you to remember, I am not sitting here saying that you need to have an identical list of things to say yes to. That is not what we're doing here. I am never about telling you what you must be doing or offering any formulas. Instead, my hope is that by sharing some of my yeses, you'll start recognizing yeses of your own that you're hungry for, that you will start listening to your own whispers, and that these are going to help spark something for you with what you want for yourself. Next week, I'm going to be back with part 2. That is really how to recognize your own yeses and then how to start saying them. So if you are sitting here and thinking, oh my God, I can't wait for part 2, be sure to hit subscribe, whether you are listening on your favorite podcast player or over on YouTube. Make sure that you are notified as soon as a new episode is ready and that you don't miss a thing. I don't want you to miss anything. I don't want you to miss anything. And as always, if you like what you hear, please comment. If you have a question, send me a DM on Instagram, whatever. There are a myriad ways to get in touch with me. Let me know what stood out to you, or what you're excited about, or what questions you have, because I don't make these for myself. I make them for you. And I want to be sure that you are getting what you need. Your feedback makes a huge difference. Okay, let's dive into those yeses that made the biggest difference to me. So these yeses are in no particular order. And the first yes that comes to mind to me is saying yes to that voice in my head that told me I needed to stop drinking. Now, for those of you who are new around here, as of our recording date, I am 7.5 years sober, 7 years, 6 months, and 5 days, I think, but who's counting? There are a ton of podcast episodes that I have recorded since I quit drinking in January 2017 about the reasons behind my decision, what went into it, what I was feeling and thinking, how I tiptoed into and through and am still in recovery, and all of the things that come along with that. So I will leave links to those if you want to dive deeper. I have a whole sobriety category. For today, I want to rewind to 2016. So for many years, I had whispers that alcohol was not serving me. I would meet people who were sober, hear about sobriety, and think, oh, that's interesting. And then y'all immediately talk myself out of it. So here's a little note. Pay attention to the things that you hear and you think, oh, that's not for me. Because there might be some really interesting, juicy information in there for you, especially if you continue to find yourself drawn to those conversations. Or what conversations are you finding yourself drawn to right now? So towards the end of 2016, I had 2.5-year-old baby twins. Life was full, life was stressful. And during that time, I started listening to the Home podcast with Laura McCowan and Holly Whitaker, who were sharing their sobriety stories. And some stories that I heard on that podcast felt very different from my life. But y'all, some didn't. For example, I remember hearing somebody talk about pouring a big glass of wine before her husband came home. And instead of having like 2 regular size, she poured like 1 big glass. So that when her husband came home and said, how much wine have you had? She could honestly say only 1 glass. And that felt extremely familiar to me. I noticed during this time, I'm listening to all these stories about sobriety. Why? It's not for me, but I'm still listening. I noticed that I would make these rules for myself. And so I had a rule that I didn't want to drink anything until after my kids went to bed, because I noticed that if I had any wine, I would be very quick-tempered. And during this time, I started to notice that when I was putting them to bed, I would be rushing through their bedtime. so that I could go have that glass of wine. Now, I am not here to judge myself or judge anyone else, but right, we're paying attention to the noticing that happens. And for me, what I noticed was that I was rushing through bedtime, wanted to get to that glass of wine. And that whisper was not saying you should quit drinking, but that whisper was saying, are you going to rush through their entire childhood so that you can drink wine? What? Y'all. That did not feel good, let me tell you. And I did everything I could to ignore that until January 3rd, 2017 rolled around. My kids had gone to bed. I was sitting on the couch watching a show. Tim was asleep on the couch next to me. I was having a glass of wine, also checking my email, doing all the multitasking as we do. And I got an email from somebody saying that they didn't like something about one of my programs. They were in my program and they didn't like something about it, which is not a fun email to receive. And also, right, it's a numbers game. Not everyone is going to be happy with everything you do. That's just part of the life. And this email sent me into a tailspin. I was, again, watching television with my laptop, the wine. I think I had 2 more glasses of wine. I spent all night looking at Pinterest and scrolling Instagram and went to bed finally at 12:30, not feeling very good. Did not sleep well that night. Woke up in the morning. I wouldn't say feeling hungover, but feeling not like my best self, right? I think we can all relate. And in that moment, I said to myself, the wine is not serving you. And I decided to take a year-long break from drinking. It was fine, let's do this. Because I didn't want to feel that way anymore. I didn't want to respond to the tough things in life that way anymore. And so I decided to quit drinking for a year as an experiment. Let's see what happens, because forever felt too long and a month didn't feel long enough. So, okay, great. I'll play that game. Let's go there. About 3 weeks later, I recognized that I was sleeping better. I was feeling significantly happier when I woke up, because that's what happens when you stop regularly consuming a depressant. Oh, isn't that interesting? And I decided to make my sobriety permanent. Now, there are lots of stories that you hear when people decide to quit drinking, and a lot of them come with scary, dramatic turning points. A DUI, you lose your job, you wake up somewhere that you don't remember being at, you've blacked out, all of those things. Mine wasn't that, right? My story was a lot more, I looked at Pinterest for a while and woke up feeling a little fuzzy. But what I knew was that even though I was not on a train that was barreling into a concrete wall, my train was going to crash. It was going to take a while, but it was going to crash. And so I said yes to that voice that said, I don't want to be on this train wreck. I don't want this to be my life. And it said, what this voice said, y'all, was alcohol will ruin your marriage. Alcohol will ruin your life if you let it, if you continue drinking. It was not a problem, but it would become a problem. Was it fun to say yes to? Oh, God, no. No. Did I fight it? Yes. Did I pretend? Had I pretended for years, a decade, that everything was fine? Yeah, y'all, I'm so good at talking myself into thinking everything's fine. I am so good at that. And there came a day when I couldn't pretend anymore. And I had to stop ignoring that voice and start listening to myself and start showing up from a more deliberate, more honest, and actually more beautiful place in my life. Another huge yes for me was moving from California to Colorado. This was inconvenient. It was hard. It was expensive. It was life altering. And it was 100% the right move for our family and for me. And this move to Colorado was not something that was precipitated by being forced. There was no job that came in. This wasn't something that we had to do. Instead, it was really Tim and I sitting down and thinking about, what do we want our life to look like? What do we want our lives to feel like? Where do we think is the best place to raise our kids? and making a really deliberate choice for our family. Now, the thing I have to say about moving, anyone who's moved knows, moving is hard. Moving is hard, and it is, not even hard, but like excruciating at times. It's not cheap. It is vulnerable. There's so much uncertainty. I was also in a very privileged position to be able to do this move. We had friends who we could stay with while we were looking for a house, right? We were not in duress. We were able to take our time with the decision. But when we talk about the yeses, and we talk about the yeses that we want to say, the yes, right? That moment of yes was us saying, maybe we should move. Maybe we don't want to live here anymore. But then it was followed by all of these other moments and the considerations and the wondering. And we drove out to Colorado in 2017 for a week to check it out because I had never been here before. I'd been to Colorado, but I had never been to Fort Collins. Let's check it out. Let's see, do we really think that this lines up with our life and with the life that we want to live? In terms of my business, in 2020, I said yes to making my business, really shifting the way that my business looked, making it smaller, making it more manageable. And y'all, this was such a hard yes to say. I had to have so many hard conversations. And, when it comes to business or anything that we're doing, right? It's so easy to just get into the maintenance mode of like, how do I keep this going? How do I keep this going? How do I keep this going? Rarely do we take the time to step back and say, do I want to keep this going? Is this what I want? Really, truly? Because listen, it's scary to ask that question because sometimes the answer is no. And holy moly, what if the answer is no? I've worked really, really hard for this life and I am not ready to let it go and I'm not ready to give it up. I know. And what I want you to know is that if you are in a place of being afraid of asking that question, is this what I really want? And this could be about life, career, family, home, all the things, right? It might also just be like, I spent a lot of money getting my hair colored and I don't even like it. Okay, yeah, right? It doesn't, or I bought expensive clothes and now they bother me and I don't love them. Whatever, right? It doesn't even have to be a big thing, but it might. Here's what I need you to know is that saying yes to change doesn't mean that you have to throw everything you've worked really hard for into the garbage. Life is not all or nothing. It's not either or. That by saying yes to what do I really want, you are able to really create this life that you want. And it's not necessarily going to look like the opposite of the life that you have. If you're married now, it's not necessarily that you need to be single. Some people do. Hard choice, right? Some people do, but not everybody, right? If you have kids and you're like, they kind of drive me crazy. Is this the life that I want? It doesn't mean that you have to leave your kids. And in fact, what we want to do is get it so that you can make these deliberate changes before you want to burn it all to the ground, because that doesn't feel good for anyone. That is not fun. So when I said yes to shifting my business, it was hard and it was scary. And it was that way of really looking at everything and being like, what do I want? What am I working so hard to create and to maintain? And what is the work that I want to be doing? And it took a while, right? It took a while. I had to make really tough decisions and to make some heartbreaking decisions. And in those decisions, I was creating the thing that was me, that felt like home, that was that reflection of the life that I wanted. So that's a reality of saying yes. The yeses that you're craving, they're not always easy or quick. Quitting drinking, moving, restructuring my business. None of these were easy yeses. They came with hard moments, hard chapters, a lot of grappling with my feelings. And when we think about raising our hands and saying yes, it sounds great on paper. But the reality is that it looks and feels so different than those moments that we celebrate with other people on Instagram, right? We forget that the yes comes with those oh my God, what have I done moments. Some yeses don't even work out. Sometimes we say yes and look back wishing that we hadn't, or saying, I thought I wanted that, but actually this is what I want over here. But every single yes is a brick paving the way into the life that you want. the life that feels good on the inside and doesn't just look good on the outside. But what about the yeses that don't work out? Does that mean that you made a mistake? No, because often you need that thing to not happen to then show you the next place, right? So this is what we're doing, y'all, is that we are, in order to get to a place where our lives feel good on the inside, we're building that life with bravery. We're building that life by doing things scared, doing the things with shaky hands, letting our voice shake, feeling so wobbly, and saying, this step feels right, and so I am going to take it and figure things out as I go. I also want you to know that you don't have to start with these big earth-shattering yeses. You can also start with what I call micro yeses. Last year I said yes to cutting my hair. Then I said yes to growing it out. And now I'm saying yes to figuring out, do I want to be short? Do I want it to be long? What do I want to do? I don't even know. You can say yes to ditching the rules for how you dress, for trying something different, for stepping into a new style. You can say yes to a new paint color on your walls. You can say yes to a year of quitting social media. You can say yes to going back on social media. You could say yes to quitting social media altogether. You can say yes to slowing down, healing, therapy, quitting therapy, finding a new therapist, going back to therapy. All of these count and all of these matter. What we're doing here when we are saying yes, when we're thinking about our yeses, when we're talking about raising your hand and saying yes, we are creating a lifestyle. And that's what I want for you, rather than just a one-off moment. With every yes that you say, you reinforce that you are a person who figures things out as you go, who is brave, who does scary things, who can create a home within yourself so that the circumstances of your life don't determine whether or not you are a success. So that the results from one thing doesn't determine whether or not you've made it or whether or not you can keep going. Instead, you give yourself permission to create a success by just being here, by breathing, by saying, I am a successful human. And when you're living that lifestyle, when you are in the habit of raising your hand and saying yes, the yeses you want to share become turning points. You're creating the circumstances for that you're creating the circumstances for that yes by saying yes to all of these little things, by learning how to listen as you go. And what we're doing then is you're paving the way so that you can become a person who also says yes to the big things. But at some point, those yeses just become like, oh, one more step in the journey. It's kind of magic, y'all. Kind of magic. Let's keep going. And we also know what happens when you don't say yes. We know that we can continue with everything's fine. We can continue convincing ourselves and others that we are okay, that we've got this. But there are things that are keeping us awake at night. And what I have seen too often is that we don't say yes to things deliberately, and then we are met with one of those really tough life wake-up calls. And often it is those wake-up calls that make us look really hard at our lives, at how we're living, and say, is this what I want and need for myself? Do I have regret? Do I want to make a change before it's too late? And here's what I want you to know is that you don't have to wait for that wake-up call. We can preempt the wake-up call and start living this way today, even though it's going to feel hard or unfamiliar or uncertain. It still does for me too. I promise. It's okay. So I am going to be back next week, and I'm going to be talking about how you know what whispers to listen to, what are the ways to engage with your whispers, and how to start really saying yes. Like, let's get into some of the mechanics of it. Remember, if you want to know as soon as the next episode comes out, hit that subscribe button, leave a comment. If you have a, oh, hell yes, or like a moment, let me know. Thank you. I love you. You're amazing. And I'll see you soon.